Okay, so I wanted like as we do often, Sheila, I want to start this conversation by stepping back, right? What makes a hospital stay, whether it's planned or not, so acutely, specifically stressful for someone living with dementia?
Well, I think anybody who has been caring for someone with dementia, every day can be disorienting, right? Any change in your routine can be disorienting. So when we change completely the environment, who's around us, it's very overwhelming. And hospitals are loud. They could be bright. There are alarms and staff and constant interruptions. So your loved one might have concerns about why they're there, where they are. They may not be used to people understanding their needs. So there's so many different things that interrupt their normal routine, their sleep, how much they're eating or drinking, or when they're eating or drinking, different medications. It's just overwhelming. It's overwhelming for a lot of us, but when you add dementia into the mix, it's tough.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you said the last bit because I get like as soon as I set foot in the hospital, and I'm a generally healthy middle aged man, but I set foot in the hospital and I can just feel it stresses me out, I guess is the way I put it. And so everything you're talking about from the sights, the sounds, the new people, the new faces, the volume of faces, the number of people that you're
Yeah.
exposed to, these are all sort of just they just it's like steroids for stress in a
Right.
dementia situation is kind of how I think about it. But I wanted to start there intentionally just because when we're in the midst of caring for anyone, never mind someone who's living with dementia. When we're in the midst of that experience, it can be hard to see things for what they are, right? And whether that be, see things in our loved one and sort of like see the forest through the trees, so to speak, in terms of where they are in their progression of dementia, or like seeing the hospital itself for what it is, in terms of just a big giant concrete stressor for a lot of people with or without dementia. So, and from here, let's talk a little bit now that we have that foundation about whether a hospital stay is planned or not. Either way, a little preparation can go a long way, right? So that's if I think about trying to set myself and the person I'm caring for up for success with dementia in the hospital. It starts with that a little bit of that like advanced planning. So, like, what are some thoughts that you could share with the audience about things we can do, right? Even if a hospital stay isn't imminent or planned at the moment,
Right.
right? Like, what are things people can do to prepare to make the sort of entrance into the hospital a little bit easier?
I think that this is a particularly vulnerable time for your loved one. And I think overall our first inclination is we want to make sure that they feel safe, that they're understood, that they feel respected. So I think one of the first things that I always like to think about is there's plenty of like tasks and things which are important, but overall, I think it's really important to think of how you're going to, what kind of a support system do you have with your loved one in that situation? So, the first thing that comes to my mind is can I be there all the time? No. So, do I have someone to stay with them if I have to run out and get some lunch or get a break? Is there someone to help at home while I am visiting them or taking care of them? So, like that's the first thing that comes to my mind. It's just like really surrounding them with what they need to have the dignity and the safety. And then, of course, I think there are things like documents to make sure we have easy access to the insurance cards, whether you have a healthcare agent or proxy, if you're a power of attorney to have that paperwork, any kind of documents that you want to have to show to the hospital. Here's what the situation is. Here's the very easily accessed
Mm,
documentation, and then going hand in hand with that, talking to people and having people understand what your situation is. have something really ready for you to say, this is my loved one's diagnosis. What kind of dementia is it? How far advanced is it? What are they baseline able to do? What's their typical communication style? What are they used to? And, what kinds of things calm them down? These are things that come, right off the
Mhm.
top of my head. I just want to protect that person.
Yeah, I love all of those ideas, and as you're talking, Sheila, there, there are a lot of parallels that I'm hearing or perceiving to just general planning we've talked about in this series before around, like, emergency plans and things like that, right? But
Mhm.
I guess the main point that, like, I love all of those ideas. The caregiver in me, the former caregiver in me could get overwhelmed
Yeah.
hearing all of that, right? So, I think the thing I'd add is, obviously it's slightly different if you're in this session today and your loved one has a procedure, that requires inpatient care scheduled for next week. There's a bit more of a time crunch or urgency in on doing some of this prep. But if you're just being proactive about it, like just take it in chunks. So
Yeah.
like, one and you're a huge advocate of this. That's I stole your phrase, Sheila, but take it in chunks and you could start with just making sure you have the documents, healthcare proxy, any related advanced care planning documents that have those in one place, right? Or copies of them. And then what I always found helpful, I love your point about sort of just documenting things about your person, right? About them actually, who they are, like where they are in their progression, what diagnosis, if you have it, all of just start writing, like open it could be pen and paper, it could be a Word document on your computer or a Google document, but just start writing it down. Like but anything is better than nothing in this.
Yeah, and really conversational, like, "Here's what they love to do. Here's
Yeah.
things that I know work." And you don't have to it doesn't have to be formal or anything else, it's just having a conversation with the person that's going to be spending a lot of time with them. What do they what's gonna calm them down? What makes them feel comfortable and safe? Some of the other things we were talking about as far as the documents too is when you're ready to go the day before, just like you're ready to go on a trip, what do you need to remember? So, what kinds of things are going to be important that you don't want to get to the hospital and go, oh, I forgot their,
Mm.
charger for this or familiar things. Sometimes it's nice to take a familiar blanket, anything to give them that sense of safety, extra clothes, of course, glasses, hearing aids, things like that. But it's good to have a list because you tend to forget those things in the mix of all the preparations.
I love something you just said. That doesn't this isn't about creating work for the caregiver at all. It's about your peace of mind.
Mhm.
And because you care, you want personalized, compassionate, relevant care for your loved one who happens to be living with dementia. So taking these steps is there's some goodness in there for you because you're doing something proactive. It doesn't have to be formal, like you said, Sheila, because it's like a conversation aid almost. You could think of it that way. So, and I love where some of your comments around like familiar blanket and familiar items and extra clothes. Like, that's another thing you could do in advance is have that go bag,
Yeah.
right, with some of those things. So those are just a few ideas that you know on their face individually may sound small little things, but the cumulative effect of these things add up to something very helpful for you, peace of mind wise, but also, towards the goal of, again, helping your person get the care they deserve. Uh,
Right.
so I see a couple of questions here. We're going to get into them in just one moment. I wanted to to shift to sort of during the stay, right?
Mm.
Because preparation is one thing. It's helpful. We should do it. Only goes so far, right? In terms of like if the goal being our loved one getting the care they deserve, personalized, relevant, dementia friendly, as it were, right? The job doesn't the work's not done, right? With just some preparation. Like so, when we're at the hospital, Sheila, like one of the things that came to mind is getting to know the care team.
Yeah.
It's like focusing, generally speaking, focusing on the things that we can control, right? There's a lot that's out of our control in the hospital or out, but like during that hospital stay, what are the things that we can control? And it starts in my mind with getting to know the care team. Do you
Yeah.
agree? What are your thoughts on
Yeah, you bet, and I love the idea of jumping right into that. I think it's really common for people to go into a hospital situation and then separate yourself and say, "Well, that's them and this is me." And I think it's really important to embrace the idea that you're stepping into another aspect of your caregiving, and that's just a different location. So, getting to know your peers, the other providers of care is really important. So it's like, hi, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is my role. This is my relationship. And in that way, you'll also learn who they are. Here's the head nurse. Here's the nursing. Here's the aides, the physicians, the case managers, the discharge planner. The discharge planner is someone I want you to really focus in on. This is someone who is in charge of course, the discharge process. But something that a lot of people don't know is they start their job on the day of admission. So as soon as your loved one goes into the hospital, they are working on what's happening, where are they going to go after this, and looking at the big picture. So that person, and it could be a social worker, it could be a nurse, sometimes that's a case manager. That person is really important for you to get in touch with because they sort of see a broad spectrum of all the things that are happening. Yeah, so getting to know that care team and joining it is really important.
Yeah, I'm so glad I was like cheering over here as you're saying like you're a part of it, right?
Yeah.
You as the caregiver, you're not adjacent to the care team that's being paid by the hospital, the doctors, nurses, and other support staff. Like you are part of the care team. So not and that it can be intimidating. We've talked lots on
Yeah.
this set on the in this series about actually talking with healthcare professionals. Like it is intimidating, but we're here to tell you that you are as valuable a member of that care team as anyone else because no one knows your person like you do.
Yeah.
And we're gonna come back to that point, but I just love that you mentioned it there, Sheila. And I want to talk practically about this. So again, the caregiver in me can feel overwhelming. All right, well, get to know the care team. What does that mean? Right. For me, and this was advice given to me, I had a couple of longer-ish hospital stays with my mom in her years with dementia. I was advised to just grab a like I had a legal pad, like an old school yellow legal pad of paper and a pen, and it
Yep.
sat in the room. And anytime I met someone new, I would write down their name,
Yeah.
their title, and I would, like, try and figure out and I got to a point, as soon as I did it once or twice, I was like, "Oh, this is fine." I wasn't shy, I wasn't, like, hesitant asking, I was like, "Oh, well, how do you relate to the other people?" A
Mhm.
key part
Yeah.
of understanding the care team is understanding how they work or they're supposed to work because they don't always do what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to work together, right? And just old school pen and paper, I
Mhm.
just wrote it down, that seemed to work for me. I'm sure people use the Notes app and things like that, but, that's something in our control that we can be doing, and by the way, if we're doing that, if we're focused on that, that's less space in our brains for all the worry, right?
Yeah.
Not that we're not gonna be worrying or stressed out because our loved one is in the hospital, of course we are, but if we're focused on, like, proactively trying to get to know that care team, who they are, what they do, build somewhat of a rapport with them, that's less real estate up here to, like, just be swirling on worry and doubt and stress and all of the rest.
Yeah, and I think an important point that you triggered for me is to think about, everyone has an area of expertise. We all know what a nurse does, what a doctor does, what the aides do. So you have a sense of what their role is. Your role is to provide insight that they have no access to.
Mm,
So you have essential context about your person and you know things that they don't know. So you're making their job easier by, you know, expressing this insight to them and letting them know the details so that they're not confused and you're all on the same page. So
yeah.
I think it's really important to think about it.
Yeah, and I that's a great segue to 'cause, the next so much of this is about communication, but the next thing that comes to my mind, when we're talking about things that we control is what we're sharing, right? And it's exactly what you're talking about. No one knows your loved one's routine like you do. No one knows, what confusion looks like in your loved one
Yeah,
better
everybody's
than
different.
you do, right? All of these sorts of things, uh, so, like, like what we're sharing and what we're communicating, not just what we're trying to get out of the care team. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, I think it's these are small things, you may not even realize how important they are, but if they were to really understand the sleep schedule, maybe your loved one has a really odd sleep schedule or eating habits or just their daily rhythms, how they do things. It's normal for you. It may not be normal for other people, but just to insert those and say, this is what matters. I always go back to calming techniques with dementia people with dementia because it's like what helps them? Is it music? Is it touch? Is it a familiar phrase or a sense of humor? Is it smiling? What is it
Mhm.
that
Mm,
works? And these little tidbits of information are really valuable for both the
mhm.
care team and your loved ones. So
Yeah. Okay, we're sort of getting into the realm where I've wanted to take this question since the second Tiffany sent it to me, but I've tried to hold back till we get here in the conversation. First off, I want to give the question asker a hug, virtual hug, because I relate to this question so much, and I've lived it. The question is, Sheila, how do you ask for a nurse trained to handle dementia, handle people living with dementia, because they all aren't, and care is affected. It
yeah,
was a disaster for my mother-in-law to have an inpatient nurse.
yeah,
I yeah, and I had the same, um, in one of my hospital stays, a nurse who was supposed to be trained in dementia, what was not, and that lack of training on the
mhm,
part of that healthcare worker, I believe, was the result of just or was the reason my mom got she essentially got sectioned on a couple of occasions because she was looking for the restroom in a new place that was totally unfamiliar to her, and instead of trying to understand what my mom needed, it
yeah,
was just a hard redirect, touching without asking, saying, "No, Rosemary, you can't go over there. You have to stay here. You have to do this." And what is we talk a lot about dementia. We help a lot of people who are caring for dementia. Like nothing good is going to come from that interaction if it's approached that
right,
way without any understanding or appreciation for what my mom was going through. Right? She needed to use the restroom. She was growing agitated by the just the rough approach, the wrong
mm,
approach by this person who is supposed to be trained, right? So
yeah,
this is I wanted to bring this question up, and I just virtual hug to the person who asked it because even when they are supposed to be trained, they may not be, right? So I
yeah.
want to talk about that, but like first, how would you ask someone to make sure? How would you ask to make sure that dementia or a nurse is has the appropriate dementia training?
Yeah, I think I would well, first of all, in general, I think we always wanna stay as it's so tempting to say, to stay calm and be respectful no matter what, but keep persisting in the questions or in the comments that you're making. So, once again, we're gonna say, "This is what's going on with mom. This is my situation. This is how we live. This is her diagnosis. Have you ever experienced this?" You can ask these little kind of questions. Is this something that you're familiar with, this kind of behavior? And you'll get a sense. So I think there's a couple of ways you can handle this. You're not going to change someone immediately the day that that your loved one is admitted if they've never had training in this. You can give them signals, you could tell them what's going on, and then I would go back to someone else in the care team. I really would. I would go to the discharge planner, somebody else that you trust, and express your concerns. I
Mhm,
mean, talk about that. Say, this is really important to me. And either they will work with that person or they will find someone else. Once again, you're being an advocate for your
mhm, mhm. Something that helped for me, I agree with all of that, Sheila, and it's the thing I would add is it's unfortunately, probably more often than not something that persistence was the key word that you uttered there, in
yeah.
my opinion, like, you
Yeah.
need to keep going, and keep going and keep going, but something that actually wound up being helpful for me was rather than saying, I want or I need a nurse with dementia training, I would ask, "What kind of training does the staff or this person have with dementia?" right?
Yeah.
So it was a slight reframe and that not a magic wand to make it easier, but that seemed to get and to your point, doing it calmly, which is admittedly not a strong suit of mine. It definitely wasn't then, but that also was really, really helpful because again, it's one thing to be told that someone has training caring for people living with dementia and has a sort of a baseline understanding, but it's another for them to actually be providing, in my opinion, what's you know what would be considered dementia friendly care, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it
So
goes back to that, what do you have control over? So I think it's staying as calm as you can, trying to keep a relationship going with whoever is helping,
yeah,
and, guiding as you can and doing the best that you can with that persistence.
yeah, not easy, but hopefully the
Mhm.
question asker that's helpful. But this is something that certainly we can, this is a really good example of the types of things we help people with on the support line. Day in and day out. So if you want sort of a more personalized discussion on that question, happy to do that. The another question about buying long-term care insurance, how to buy it, Sheila. I mean, I would that's a loaded question and probably something well suited for a one-on-one conversation. There's there's a lot to sort of peel back in the onion of long-term care insurance.
Just
Yeah,
some of the general ideas, if you have a local senior center or if you have a, area agency on aging, often they have social workers who could help you with questions like that, but these is something that, a legal team could also help with, help you to understand how to get long-term care insurance. It is a big question.
yeah, absolutely. Time flies when we're having fun. There's one important point I wanted to get to before we sort of segue to closing. But we've been talking. You've mentioned the word advocacy a couple times, Sheila,
Yeah.
and there's been sort of a thread of advocacy through everything we've talked about. Particularly important when talking with the discharge planner, when
Mhm.
preparing to leave. Anytime you're talking with this discharge planner, the one of the best forms of advocacy you can perform is just being unfiltered, honest, and explicitly clear with what you're sharing with them about your situation after
Right.
the hospital,
Yep.
right? Because, and Sheila, you tell me this all the time, but when people leave the hospital, rarely does it mean they're completely healthy, right?
Right.
They're rarely are they being discharged because they're completely healthy. There's more care that comes. Like the discharge is a happy moment, of course,
Yes.
because no one likes to be in the hospital, but it's a point of increasing intensity for us as caregivers.
100%. Yeah,
And
anything that a whole team was doing is now is really up to you. So it's really
yeah,
important. I just want to just mention some of those things with the discharge process to make sure that you ask questions until you understand the answer. You will be getting, or you should be getting, home care instructions, discharge instructions about here's the new medications, here's what to stop taking, here's the follow up appointments to make, here's the things to watch out for if a symptom changes or a behavior changes. So,
mhm,
you just really want to make sure you understand that discharge instruction packet.
absolutely. Keep asking until you have absolute clarity. And
Yeah.
again, just on the a real quick example in 30 seconds, but a discharge planner might say something like, "So, do you have family around, or are there people, or do you have family in the area, right? Or family in the area that could help, or however they phrase it. But maybe you have a brother here, and a cousin there that uh, you haven't talked to in 20 years. But if you just say, yeah, I have a brother who lives 2 times away and a cousin over here, 15 minutes away, they might be hearing, okay, has people to help, right? When that may not be the case, right?
Right.
So being as specific as you can
Mhm.
about your situation, because what it means when people leave the hospital and they're not fully healthy, it means they still need care. And who provides the care? Us. Us as the caregiver, right? So we need to just be as clear and specific as possible with the discharge planner. So Okay, next session is when is it? June 25th, I believe. Tiffany put the link in the chat. Yep, see that. We're talking about decision fatigue, another really um, sneaky important topic because decision fatigue. If you know, you know. I guess what you say, but excited to talk about it on June 25th because it is a really really important topic. Any last words for the audience today, Sheila?
Hospital stays are hard, especially with dementia. You have knowledge and expertise that no one else does, so feel confident in that. Jump into the mix, prepare, communicate, be persistent, and we're sending you our best.
Yes, agreed. Agreed. I see a few other questions here that we didn't obviously get a chance to respond to in the session, but we will follow up directly with you to get you answers to those questions. And so, hope to see you on June 25th. And in the meantime, you're doing the best you can. Great job, and we'll see you soon.
Bye bye.